Hi there, welcome to What, Series 16. And this is where Joseph meets the butler and the baker when he's in prison. You see, the Egyptian royal butler and the baker are put into prison, and we're not exactly sure what the reason is, but it doesn't sound good. Here's what it says. It came to pass after these things that the butler and the baker of the king of Egypt offended their lord, the king of Egypt. And Pharaoh was angry with his two officers, the chief butler and the chief baker. So he put them in custody in the house of the captain of the guard in prison, the place where Joseph was confined. The captain of the guard charged Joseph with them, and he served them. So they were in custody for a while. Okay, you get the scenario there. It came to pass after these things. In other words, after a while, Joseph is in prison and he's prospering in his circumstances. Now, it sounds weird for being in prison like that. But remember, at the end of Genesis 39, he develops great authority and responsibility for the operations of the prison, even though he was a prisoner. In that prison, the butler and the baker of the king of Egypt were there. The butler oversaw Pharaoh's wine, and the baker was in charge of Pharaoh's food. They were in prison because they offended their lord, the king of Egypt. By how the account will develop it is, they were probably there because there was a plot to murder Pharaoh and perhaps by poisoning. So logically, they were two subjects, or two suspects, I should say. They were probably there on suspicion of attempted murder. But they were really there because God wanted them to meet Joseph. And remember, it says in Genesis 39, verse 23, the Lord was with him. Actually, let's keep that in the background of our thought processes while we go through the rest of the story of Joseph. The captain of the guard charged Joseph with them, and he served them. Now, this is an amazing statement. He's giving favorable treatment to Joseph, the captain of the guard. And it's interesting because Potiphar was actually the captain of the guard. So is it Potiphar that's doing this? And did Potiphar actually not believe the accusations of his wife made against Joseph? We know this because, in Genesis 39:1, Potiphar is referred to as the captain of the guard. And he served them. Even though Joseph had a position of high authority, he didn't use it to make others serve him. He used the high position to serve others. Now, in verses 5 to 7, we see that Joseph shows concern for the butler and the baker. Here we go in verse 5. Then the butler and the baker of the king of Egypt, who were confined in the prison, had a dream. Both of them, each man's dream in one night, and each man's dream with its own interpretation. And Joseph came into them in the morning and looked at them and saw that they were sad. So he asked Pharaoh's officers who were with them in custody of his lord's house, saying, "Why do you look so sad?" You see, it says there, Joseph came into them in the morning and looked at them and saw they were sad. This is, I suppose, a window that we can see the heart of Joseph. These men are consumed with anger and bitterness, and they do not often take a concern for the personal problems of others. But here we see Joseph did. He says, "Why do you look so sad today?" It would be easy, perhaps technically true, for Joseph to think that because of all the wrong done against him, everything should center on his own feelings and hurts. But instead, he cared for these guys. He cared for the prisoners, particularly the butler and the baker, and he worried why they looked so sad. I suppose in this we see a bit of a glimpse of Jesus as well. He was an innocent man and came into humanity's prison, if we want to use that analogy, and lived the hardships and temptations and suffered worse than all of us, yet he never looked for our pity. In a sense, Jesus asks, why do you look so sad today? As Jesus lives his life through his people, they will also care about the needs of others. That's us. We need to be caring for the needs of others. We need to learn from Joseph and learn from Jesus. See you next week.